Welcome, guys. This is Matt Griffiths, head coach of G-Force, and I'm going to be bringing you a basics of muscle building guide. This seems to be a common area of confusion. I'm going to touch on some of the real things that hold people back. Now, you may find that this challenges you quite a lot, but the truth of the matter is these are things that people need to hear and need to understand if they really want to progress to get that kind of goal physique that they're after. So let's get into this. Very often, people will come to me and they'll say, I'm not seeing much muscle growth. I'm doing X, Y, Z. I'm doing everything properly. What's happening? And my question is, well, how do you know you're doing everything properly? If you're doing everything properly and you're not seeing much muscle growth, do you not think there's a problem? And it's a very, very tough decision for people to make, to actually understand that, yes, you need to reach out and actually need help and education on a topic. The gym world, the fitness world, the health industry, people love to think that they know it all. I'm going to cover some of this in some of the points that come through, but the truth of the matter is nobody, including myself, knows it all, has read all the research, and has gone through every single study. So the number one catalyst to people's success in building muscle will always stem from their belief system. It's not necessarily a lack of know-how or skill. It's what you've been led to believe, because people will apply themselves to what they believe. And if they don't believe something, even if it's backed up by research, they will naturally not apply themselves in the same fashion towards this. We call this cognitive dissonance. It's a very, very real thing. This is when you will cling to a belief despite there being a huge tsunami of evidence to the contrary. So the harsh truth here is poor beliefs and a lack of consistency are what keep most people bringing significant significant muscle mass. Now, the reason behind this is the poor beliefs. People will be consistent to those, but they'll lack consistency in continually learning and developing. They'll say, for example, something worked for them 10 years ago, and they'll try the same thing. And I'm thinking, well, you're 10 years further down the line, your muscles are in a different place, your body's in a different place. You're older, you may have stretched the muscles more, they may have contracted to shorten more, so they're not functioning quite the same. That's what I mean by sort of different place. Not that they're down the shop somewhere else or they've gone to a different country. But understand that having those poor beliefs around, well, that worked then, ergo, it must work now. Every other aspect of the world we accept moves on, changes and evolves. But training, we don't seem to do that with. So the biggest thing that separates you between where you are today and where you want to be is found with who you are today. And that's what I'm trying to get through to you here. Who you are and where you need to go to evolve and develop to be able to build that muscle and build your dream physique. So specifically, your beliefs around these common misconceptions, which I'm going to cover on this slide after this quote from me. You cannot build something from nothing, but with water from little acorns grow mighty oaks. So just by planting the correct seed of challenging your beliefs, if that is the one thing you take from this lesson and you really challenge your beliefs and you do your own research and you really look into something and you go, this isn't working, let's clean the slate, look at something else and actually delve into the reality, what actually works, then you've done something good and I've helped you out there, which would be fantastic. So your view or your lack of knowledge will shape your beliefs. Your current belief structure is built on past experiences that either you have personally experienced or an experience from somebody you know. We're all aware of how this works. There'll be some guy, for example, in the gym, he might be in better shape than you, and he says, oh, you need to do this because this is what worked for me. And you immediately look at them and go, well, I want to be like that. That's how I want to look. Even if they've got a completely different body shape, you still think it. So therefore, you think if you do that, it must work the same, despite the fact you're not that person. So this comes from the hearsay from unqualified people. Everybody has an opinion, and opinions, as we say in the UK, are like arseholes. Everyone's got one, and they're usually full of shit. So going through this, understand that there are a huge amount of unqualified people. Just because somebody has spent 20 years lifting in the gym, it doesn't make them a qualified coach, because they may know themselves inside out. That doesn't mean they can apply the same theory to you. Get mixed messages from media sources, and now this is a real bugbear of mine. It's something that always happens with every sort of industry, but this one, it's always the next secret thing, the next fad, the next big hook, the next thing that the predators left when they were designing the aliens to fight, or something along those lines, to give you this sense of, this is the trick you've been missing. Unfortunately, the trick you've been missing is you haven't been learning, and you've been lazy along that front, and you've stuck to what you think you know, and you've never actually improved that sort of knowledge. And so you've never really got out of first gear when it comes to muscle building. And then irrelevant application to where you are now. This sort of goes back to what I've already covered. You have to take where you are now. If you are driving your car or a vehicle and you have satellite navigation on, and for some reason you're diverted somewhere, the sat nav breaks and you're in a place where you're lost, you don't set the sat nav from your home address or from where you originally left your destination, your original point of leaving, to go to your destination. You know, that origin point has now changed. It's from where you are now to get to the destination, and that route may look completely different to what you initially thought it was going to be. Just think of that logic, because this is something I'm really trying to cover on this. People get this wrong all the time. All the time. It's one of the most simple things, but we've become blinkered and blind to it because we don't want to learn something new. We don't want to try. We don't want to actually develop. And the truth of the matter is, muscle building is challenging, and you have to be able to adapt to do it. So we're going to audit the top 4 mistakes. Let's go through these. So I need to always lift more weight. Now, this is a very common one. People just say, just do whatever sets and reps you're doing, 4 sets of 10 for argument's sake. Just add a little bit until you can do 12 reps, and then add some more weight and go back to 4 sets of 8 or 10. And then you keep adding weight. This is linear progression. Linear progression has a shelf life. It does not work continuously. And that is very straightforward. Otherwise, you'd all be muscular. I need to do more exercise and train to failure. There's a lot out there around this sort of beast mode, go hard or go home, you know, all these amazing gung-ho sayings. And I like to counter them with one of Lee Haney's, who is one of the most decorated Mr. Olympias there ever was. And he said his goal when he went into the gym was to stimulate, not annihilate. I cannot eat enough food. People will very often claim that they can't build muscle because they simply cannot eat enough food. I'm pretty sure you're all aware of those people that gain ridiculous amounts of weight and get hugely obese. They did not start off being able to eat that amount of food. Not applying the same mindset to your health as you do to your personal life or your professional life. So if something wasn't working, if you were running a business, you're running a company, let's, for argument's sake, you had 5 employees, and one of those employees was constantly and continuously underperforming versus the other 4. What do? Do you make allowances? Do you get the other 4 to cover the work? Or would you go through the process of getting rid of that employee and getting somebody else in that could be brought up to speed and match the output, or perhaps even exceed the output of the other 4? It's straightforward logic, but we don't do that. We continuously butt our heads against a brick wall and don't push ourselves. So let's look into these in a bit more detail. I always need to lift more weight and train to failure. So your body is a biological engine. So let's compare it, to make this really simple, to a mechanical engine. If you were to redline your vehicle's engine for an excessive period of time, so you're constantly pushing it to that point of almost mechanical failure, what actually happens to the performance, longevity, and indeed fuel consumption of that vehicle? I'm sure you're all aware if you were to do that, the engine would fail, and it would fail a lot quicker than if you were progressively moving up and down the correct RPM bands and you were accelerating at the correct speed, braking at the correct speed, etc., generally looking after your vehicle. But we don't do this with our body. We seem to think that unless we put ourselves in this absolute pit of agony, that we're not going to build muscle. And I just simply ask you, well, how far has that got you so far? Where are you with this? So often we'll push for a number on the bar, when in reality, what we're trying to do is create mechanical tension with the weights. Now, this is where just always lifting more can become a problem, because people do not address how they lift or how they're stimulating the muscle. They just like to add more weight. And what they'll do is they'll bring in other muscles, their form will slacken, their technique will slacken, and they're not actually lifting more weight with the target muscle. And so it becomes a kind of ego thing. So we need to create mechanical tension in the appropriate place. That is more important than just putting a load on the bar. I need to do more exercise. So this one, I'm not going to go into this too much. Just trust the coaches. Trust what we're saying to you here. There is such a thing as the MRV, which is your maximum recoverable volume, your MAV, your maximum adaptive volume. And I can pretty much bet that most of you have never really looked into those things, made notes, made detailed diaries, and monitored how you cycle through these, because they change based on the season, they change based on your diet, they change based upon your rest schedule. So I can pretty much be sure you haven't really applied those. So you don't always need to do more exercise. Sometimes less is more. And also depending on your experience level, it's actually been shown in more recent research that for somebody that's actually quite advanced in the gym, they can do up to 70% less than they're doing and still achieve the same results. 70% less. Crazy, isn't it? But that's how these things actually work. So more exercise does require more energy, and you need to be in an energy surplus to build muscle mass. You have to have an excess of calories, because, as I pointed out, you can't build something from nothing. You have to have that there. So if you are struggling to eat and you're doing more and more exercise, perhaps try cutting down that exercise. So more is not always better. Better is better. That's going to be a very, very tough pill for most to swallow, because they like to think they know what they're doing. They like to think, I just need to do this. But it's not working, and that's why you're looking at this. So the application of the best method at the best time is fundamental here. That linear overload, that may work during a particular cycle, and then your MAV and your MRV change, and you have to adapt your training methods. You have to change those things. You have to make sure that you're doing the optimal thing at that time to continue to grow muscle. And because things are constantly changing and constantly adapting, you have to be constantly logging and constantly aware of what's going on. I cannot eat enough food. This is quite a common one. So you're not going to go from 1,500 calories to sort of 2,000 calories comfortably overnight. Your stomach needs training too. It can be stretched. So make use of liquid calories, protein shakes, milk, soups, etc. If you are getting tired of chewing, if you are struggling to really get those calories down, start having a few more of these things. Protein shakes and milk are particularly good. I'd avoid unnecessary sort of processed sugars from sort of squeezed out fruit juices, etc., or sort of fizzy sodas, etc., purely because we want to try and do that in general for our health. But if it is a go-to and it's a form of you getting your carbohydrates and you're monitoring them, it can be used. Next, change the mindset that's limiting you. If you make your body need it, it will start craving it. This is how any addiction actually works. And you're trying to get your body in the position and in that zone where it's addicted to growing. That's what you're effectively trying to do. Make it need the food and then give it the food, and eventually you will start craving it. So focus on the goal. Growth can be painful. Do not let it hold you back. So, not applying the same mindset to your health as your business. Now, I've covered a bit of this already, but you don't tend to rush in business. You very often you take your time, you check the market, and you take your opportunities. You control all of the variables that you can. If you were to spot, for example, a place where you were hemorrhaging money for something you didn't need, you'd plug that hole. You'd either stop the supply of something, you'd get rid of that employee, do whatever you'd had to do, but you'd control that variable. And yet we don't do that with our health. Accept that some tasks are uncomfortable but necessary for the long-term goal. This could be anything. This could be a particular exercise that would give you optimal muscle growth for a particular area, but you don't like that exercise or you can't perform it correctly. So you try and do alternatives. Stop looking for alternatives. Do you do that with children when they're riding a bike? Do you turn around when they take their training wheels off and they just fall off that bike? Go, no, it's okay. We'll just get you a trike or a quad, or we'll just keep riding with your training wheels. No, we get them to try and learn how to do it. Learn how to do the most optimal movements, because that short-term annoyance of training to be able to do those things will give you greater long-term benefits towards your muscularity, your flexibility, and your health. Build your knowledge and skill set always. I'm constantly doing this, constantly. I spend a good 2 or 3 hours a day going over research. Admittedly, it's part of what I do for a living, sort of to help people and build people up. But ultimately, you can never know too much. Find the things that work, go through things, speak to experts, get the experts' opinions on things. Don't just read a generic article that isn't aimed at you, that isn't aimed at your specific needs, your specific requirements, and just blindly apply it. Build your knowledge, build your skill set. And this includes your physical skill set, your flexibility, your mobility, your coordination, your timing. If you start producing those things far, far better, you will develop more muscle mass. Follow the advice of people who have achieved that level already. So if these people are actually qualified people and they've already been there, do be wary of the unqualified person that's a genetic freak and just big for the reason. But if you've seen somebody that's actually been, for example, really skinny and they've developed a great deal of muscularity and they've done all these things, building their knowledge, building their skill set, learning, and they've had to do all the mental heavy lifting as well as the physical stuff. Start listening to those people. Start listening to the people who've already developed that muscle mass. So what you need to do to build muscle, I'm just repeating that because I read it completely wrong the first time because I'm only human. So you do need to create progressive overload. Now, there are multiple ways of achieving this above simply doing more. Just doing more weight, as we already touched on, is called linear progression. There are multiple forms of progression. You can create progressive overload by creating a greater range of motion for a muscle. It's not used to working in that range of motion, and therefore it's lengthening and contracting through a greater range, and thus will stimulate more muscle fibers. People don't realize that. That's still a form of overload because it's forcing your body to adapt to something. You may need to back off lifting heavy weights because your nervous system is tired and you're exceeding your MRV. You're getting to that point of burnout. You may need to come back and switch the training method. You may need to do work where you're working on controlling a load through a greater speed to develop more force on an eccentric portion of a lift. So you're developing greater control on the concentric and then more force on the eccentric because you've learned that actually optimally that's the best way to build muscle mass, not just blindly going time under tension towards something. Eat sufficient calories and protein and hydrate. Always hydrate. I mean, that one covers everything for health. You've heard the adage of how much percentage water we are. So keep having that water in us. So keep yourself hydrated. You must eat sufficient calories and you must have sufficient protein within those calories. Always aim for full branch chain amino acids where you can to cover as much as possible. The essential amino acids, I should point out. So if you have a nice balanced diet, you should be able to do that. And make sure you're eating sufficient, decent, clean as you can calories, and then bulk it up where you need to sort of push yourself forward. I would recommend if you do struggle to eat, Use the liquid calories initially until you get to that point where you start to feel a bit more hungry, and then replace liquid calories with food. The reason for this is liquid calories are faster digested by the body and don't always support the needs quite as well, whereas actual food is what we're designed to have. Rest, recover, and sleep. This is one of the biggest ones. I've had a lot of guys come to me trying to build themselves up, and they sleep 5 or 6 hours a night and they're constantly fatigued. What will happen there is you're constantly placing your body in a stress zone. Your maximum recoverable volume will drop considerably, and therefore what you can actually recover from in the gym may actually be below your maximum adaptive volume. So where you're optimal to actually adapt to the volume of training and build the muscle, what you can recover from may be subpar beneath that, and you're always putting yourself in a deficit, and you will never truly be able to gain a decent amount of muscle. So make sure you focus on your rest, recovery, and sleep. And adjust in small amounts to maintain progression. Don't go for huge jumps. Don't get carried away when weights do start increasing. And, oh, I wonder what my 1 rep max is. Unless you are a strength athlete, you don't really need to know that, and it isn't conducive to your sort of training. You don't need to be in that area at all. You can get a very, very good gauge of what a 1 rep max is by a sort of maximum triple, possibly a maximum double, but you start moving into risk versus reward danger zones. And unless you're an experienced athlete in that area, working hand in hand with an experienced coach, I wouldn't recommend it. Listen to your coaches. This is something I want to tell you all. You know, we want the best for you. We will always come from the most tried and tested place. Our motto, as you can see there, is literally fusing science with experience. I've had all the injuries and I've made all the mistakes myself already, and I'm trying to ensure you don't make the same mistakes. You will progress a huge amount faster. If I went back to when I first started training, knowing what I know now, I would be a completely different beast with a lot less injuries, a lot more muscle mass, a lot leaner and more athletic. It's been trial and error, and I've banged my head against the wall enough times. So listen to us and the rest of the coaching team here. There's a reason we are your coaches, and there's a reason for what we're doing. So if you are consistent in your dedication and ruthless in your conviction, what you will become will be a reflection of this. So consistent in your ability to challenge your own beliefs, learn, evolve, and adapt to what you actually need. Be ruthless. So when something's not working, just because you have a belief that it worked for somebody else, or it's something that's worked for you in the past, but you can see this has not worked for multiple weeks in a row, be ruthless. Get rid of it. It's not helping you. Why are you still doing it? This has been a short lesson. I do hope it was useful. Obviously, always come through to me, message one of the, message Cody or Tim or one of the other coaching staff that we have within GeForce, and we will always help you out. This is very straightforward in what it is. It's challenging to most people's mindsets, and you'll generally find once you change from that and you start really understanding what we're trying to get across here, you will see far better results. Hope that's gone well for you guys. As ever, message with any questions and we'll go from there.